Awesome.
Sure.
So we wanted to start off, but just introducing ourselves, and then we'll take some time to get to know the other folks in the room. My name is Erin Coker, and this is my third year at GSN as a senior director. I have the privilege of supporting schools across the state with leadership, talent, and academic improvement. Before joining GSN, I worked in Denver Public Schools for my entire career. I had a variety of different positions. I was a teacher, a literacy specialist, a school improvement partner. And I have also worked at the national level as a curriculum developer. And what gets me really excited about the topic tonight is that the majority of my experience developing and writing curriculum has been project-based learning. So this is something that I'm very passionate about and excited that you all are here to join us. So I'll pass it over to my colleague, Katie.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Katie Peyton. I'm a former high school English teacher, instructional coach, and I've been with Generation Schools Network for 10 years, supporting our turnaround leadership program, our social emotional learning, our diagnostic reviews. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. So with that, we're going to move over to our objectives. So in today's session, we're, as Erin said, focused on project-based learning. And we are going to be exploring these effective strategies that promote rigorous academic standards, foster skill development, and deepen student engagement. All three of these things are really hallmarks of project-based learning, and you have to have all three of them to really have effective and high-quality project-based learning. The first one, of course, everything we do has to be grounded in our academic standards. The second one, when we say foster skill development, I really want to also talk about practicing existing skills as part of projects, right? So not just learning new skills, but deepening students' understanding of current skills. And also with student engagement, students are going to be engaged because it's going to be a relevant real world problem scenario. So all three of those things are really crucial. Another thing here is that we are doing project-based learning. We thought this would be a really fitting topic for you all in May. Hopefully these strategies can be implemented this week, next week in your schools. Most school schedules have students done with testing at this point, and now it's keeping them engaged, right? And it's not just about watching movies or moving the class outside or doing like athletic events all through May. It's also about project-based learning really puts the learning onto the kids to drive their own learning. When the teachers are, we might be feeling some burnout, we might be feeling some stress from the year. And so project-based learning is a great way to alleviate all of that while really giving kids relevant skills that they need to move forward in their life after school or for the next school year. And so next up, we want to hear from you all who's in the room. So I'm going to actually call on folks. If you could unmute and let us know who you are. We would love to know your name. Educators like yourselves all around the state and throughout the US has been really rewarding for me. Thanks, Erin. I forgot to push that button. And then, so pass it back over to Erin, and we're going to do an overview of BFI.
Right, thank you. So before we dive into the content for our session, we want to revisit this definition that comes from the Colorado Department of Education to ground us in our work. So when we talk about what is best first instruction, or BFI, when planning for best first instruction, the foundation requires educators, all of us, to build meaningful relationships with all students, address individual needs, create relevancy by allowing students to see themselves in their learning, and provide opportunities for exploration and expression. The educator also utilizes instructional materials and strategies that honor the diversity of their classroom. And then to add to our understanding of BFI, here are the 4 components that are called out by the Colorado Department of Education. And what I think is really, really exciting about tonight is that when we think about PBL, we see strong alignment to every single one of these. There's opportunities to build relationship with students. There's opportunities to meet the needs of all students. We can create relevancy. And then one of my other favorite topics is we foster disciplinary literacy. So our folks who are in our CTE classrooms, you are also literacy teachers. And so we're going to be showing you a little bit about what that can look like and sound like through the lens of PBL.
Oh, great. So we're going to jump right into our grounding text, which is going to show us about the key principles of PBL. So those are hierarchies folks who are like, how do we implement this? These 4 key principles will help you know that this is what you are going to be implementing. So in the chat, we already have this document, which is our one pager. Everything we need for this session will be in here today. So I'm going to ask everybody to go ahead and click on that, the key principles of PBL, the anchor text that we're going to be grounding in. And I'm going to let you go ahead and have the privilege of skipping the first 2 pages, jumping to page 3, in which you'll see a box of the 4 key principles of PBL. So what I'd like to do is have everybody pause for about 2 minutes and skim or read those 4 key principles. Go off camera while you're reading those 4 key principles. And then when you're done, turn your camera back on and we'll be able to discuss those. Any questions? All right, we'll see you all in about 2. The article confirm. How does the article confirm, challenge, or expand on how you define and think about PBL? So as these 4 key principles are listed here, does anybody have something that they want to chime in that they learned new or expanded on their current working definition of PBL that was from this article?
I can speak to what we've been chatting about with the deep integration to course content. We're thinking about how do you do that when you have we have one project or one theme for kindergarten through 8th grade. And so we've talked about, we just had a big night and everybody worked on every piece of it. And next year we'd like to say, all right, the K1 group is going to work on this part of the project. And the 2nd through 4th will work on this, and the 5th through 8th. And so we can integrate it with their specific content standards for that theme. And then we can work together as a group to have a big reflection afterwards.
Yeah. Absolutely, Laurel. And we have a resource, I think, that will help you think about what that will look like in terms of your vertical alignment and meeting standards at different grade levels. So I'm excited to share that with you.
For the assessment piece. We're also just talking about the assessment and a wish. We're just going to throw things out there. You just mute us if we're
No, go for it.
But we could use some sort of a rubric. Like assessment is one of the hardest pieces. So okay, good. That's what we figured, is you would have something like that, but that's what we want.
I have 2.
So
Yay.
Yes.
yep. So
you ask and you
session,
shall receive.
you're so in this session, we're going to share one resource for each of these 4 things and some additional resources as well. So hopefully that'll get you started. These are all things that can be grabbed and taken and copy pasted and used in your schools for free. And so hopefully something at least gives you a start. Anybody else wanted to share how the article confirmed or expanded their definition of PBL? Otherwise,
I think it just kind of
thanks.
reinforces it further. And again, being not so much a core teacher, but a very specific content area, without being very specific project-based learning, students are going to struggle to understand the concepts. They're going to struggle to understand the practical math, the science, the physics, everything else like that, and to grasp how it all comes together in the big picture of owning a car or servicing a car even. And so, you talk about having standards you got to meet as far as testing and how you test it. At least for myself, it's all laid out from ASE because it's national standards that we have to meet for teaching. It's not like I have to go off and, I mean, yes, I go off and create tests and stuff like that. But the fact is that it's all a 2-part test. There's a written and there's a hands-on portion, and they both go hand in hand. And so somebody can pass the written portion whenever they want, but until they have the 2 years of actual certificational time, not just from them saying, I've done 2 years, it's got to be somebody who was a supervisor above them, a shop manager, shop owner. They then have to fill out the paperwork saying, yes, we agree. This person has completed 2 years of actual experience in the shop. They send it off to ASE, and ASE then says, okay, congratulations. You are now ASE accredited as a technician in whatever, specific area you are in. And as far as students go, getting them to understand that the big picture of, how you get through high school and develop these mindsets of always digging down the rabbit hole and going further into it. I've noticed a lot of kids seem to struggle with that concept right now. And maybe it's just the current, age that's coming up and, the cell phones being prevalent from COVID and everything like that. But I hate using that as a crutch, so to speak, in regard to that. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Peter, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to try to be really intentional and highlight some CTE pieces because we have a few folks who teach CTE in the room. So thank you for shining a light on that.
So with that, I'll bring us into our first key principle: purposeful and authentic experiences. I don't need to read everything that's on the screen to you here. You all just had an opportunity to skim through the article. The thing that comes up for me the most is I'm really looking at that second bullet: driven by a meaningful, feasible question that the students have asked, right? So the adults do not create the questions in project-based learning. It's important that the kids ask the questions. So this could be something like, how do we have more healthy options in the lunchroom? There's a video like that in your resources that kids are creating salad greens in their greenhouses. And so there's everything from business planning to science, biology, to math, to finances, and everything in between, teamwork, et cetera, dividing up the tasks. And so it starts with a question that the kids ask and is now really relevant in this school community. And they make salad greens in their greenhouse that the entire district eats. And they have been doing that for a while. So really remembering that this is really kid driven to drive their authentic experiences. So next up, your first resource. There are two resources on this slide, and again, as we mentioned, and Erin's going to show us right here, you guys are following along and have those two links under Principle 1, content area writing products, and argument versus informational text. Both of these resources are really great, and so if you could just pause there for a second, Erin.
Sure.
You'll see here that there's a difference between informational, explanatory, of course, and argumentative. All of us who have been ELA teachers know this, and there's ELA examples there. But let's look at the social studies blocks for a second. So in social studies, informational text can be something like a map. We might not have thought of a map as a text, but it really is one, right? It shows us where things are. It shows us how late things are open. We use them all the time. They're in our pockets. Kids are used to seeing them on the walls of their classrooms. But how do we incorporate those into a project so that they could write a map, as opposed to an argumentative text in social studies that's a letter to the editor of a newspaper, right? So the issue that they care about could have a letter to the editor, and so they need to have those writing skills. Back to that first objective of fostering skill development, having them practice those skills as part of the project is really important. The two links here are very similar. So there's argument versus informational and content areas. So they're really just laid out differently. One of them is around the content areas, and one of them is around that argument versus informational text. So it just depends on the scope of the project you're doing. You can use either one. And so anything else that you want to add there, Erin?
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on how you're planning, it's always really great to start with the end in mind and think about what is the product that my students are going to create at the end of this project that is authentic and that is aligned to something that someone in any of these disciplines in the real world would create. Oftentimes we get very stuck on, well, they're going to write an essay or they're going to do a poster, right? But there's so many other options that you can pick from depending on your content area. And so those folks that are in the room who work in CTE, you might take a look at the STEM list and see, is there a product that would align with the work that we're doing in CTE? So for example, last year I had the opportunity to join the auto teacher at Walsenburg Junior Senior High in his classroom. And one of the things that students were creating was they were creating a document that listed out exactly all of the different parts, working parts of the car that they needed to inspect so that that car could pass inspection for I think it was like 6 months, and then they re-inspected. So this list, this sequential list of, we need to make sure that the right blinker is working, that the horn works, that the windshield wiper fluid is full, right? All of those things, and creating that list gave the students an opportunity to create a product that was authentic to that discipline. So when starting with the end in mind, you can utilize either of these resources, either informational or argumentative by content area, or by content area, to start with an authentic product that really gets your students engaged and excited about what they're going to create. All right.
Okay, so sorry, my the power just went out where I am, so the internet went with it, so I had to come on back really quick. I'm so sorry. So on these 3 questions that are on your screen, take a quick look, and I'll let you all choose which question you'd like to answer, right? So we can talk about the types of written products, which ones you want to try. Is there a specific PBL project you have that you've already started that aligns well with one of these written products? So again, popcorn out. You can feel free to answer any one of the 3 questions. We won't spend more than a couple minutes on this, but we'd love to open that up.
Recording here. All right, so now we're going to turn our attention to the second key design principle, which is deep integration with course content. And when I think about this design principle, it's really about depth over breadth. When PBL is done really well, students are going to dive really deeply into a task, and they're going to learn all aspects. They're going to cross disciplines. They're going to make real world connections. And this is when we get to talk about that really important question, when are we going to use this, and why does this matter? Which honestly, I think we need to be talking about every day in school. And what's really exciting is that along the way, with deep integration of course content, we have this opportunity for students to cultivate skills that they need to know now and in the future with the content. And the exciting part of the project is what is the vehicle. It's what's moving it. I also like to think about it like hiding the broccoli and the mac and cheese, right? The kids are eating the mac and cheese and they're really excited about it. And then we're able to sneak in the broccoli and teach them literacy skills, teach them math skills, teach them life skills, all of those sorts of things. So the tool that we would like to highlight for you all tonight, and Laurel and your team, this is your first rubric. This comes from Summit. This is the Summit Skills Cognitive Rubric. And what's really great about this rubric is it is designed with PBL in mind. It is a rubric that you can use for assessment, you can use it for instruction, and you can use it as a planning tool. It outlines the continuum of skills that are necessary for college and career readiness. And these skills are interdisciplinary. They require higher order thinking and application. So for example, students are going to make connections and inferences. They're going to evaluate arguments. This rubric spans grades 3 through 12, and there are 36 skills with 8 different score levels. So I will also say the use of a common analytic rubric for assessment of project-based learning, it allows for a targeted standards-aligned feedback to students, and it supports the development of those key skills over time. So this tool specifically comes from SCALE, which is the Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity. And I have another tool that I'm going to share with you later tonight that also comes from SCALE. So when you're thinking about what does it look like and sound like to teach the skills within PBL, this is your tool. I also like to think about the image as a pie, with each of these slices representing a different cognitive skill that students learn within a PBL project. So each slice of the pie is aligned to standards and real world skills that students are going to cultivate while they're learning. So the vehicle, right, is the content that they're learning, and these are the skills that we're going to teach them embedded within the unit. And what's also really great about this tool is that it's comprehensive. It defines all of the things that we're asking them to do: reading, writing, speaking, listening, and thinking, all in one tool. So we want to give you a couple minutes to dig into that rubric. If you go to your one pager, it's the second document here. It's very long. It's a big document. I would say for the purposes of our conversations tonight, I would stick to page 1 and take a look at the pie in more detail so that you can look at the different skill slices of the pie. So we'll pause there for just a second. And then when we come back together, we'd love to talk a little bit about how might you use this rubric in your school or classroom? Are there skills that you're already teaching? Are there skills that are jumping out at you that you want to also address?
And I just want to call out that this rubric is appropriate for grades 3 to 12. So you'll see in there, K to 2 is not reflected in these skill sets.
That's right. Thanks, Katie. Okay, so we're at number 3 out of 4. So now we're going to shift to talking about meaningful and supportive relationships. And to me, what jumps out when I think about this key design principle is Zaretta Hammond's work and her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. Specifically, she talks about the teacher being a warm demander, which is an educator that balances relationship building and support with high expectations. And so we have a tool that we're going to share with you from Hammond tonight. It is her asset-based feedback protocol, which is designed to deliver effective, culturally responsive feedback that fosters student growth. So linked in your one-pager, you're going to find it. It's called Figure 6.4, and she provides 9 steps that from start to finish will help build trust with the student and encourage reflection and a growth mindset. She talks about this in her book, and she calls it fostering a learning partnership with the student. So when we think about PBL specifically, I would consider when you could use this protocol during your unit and at one frequency. So let me offer a suggestion. So you might consider using this protocol with individual students or groups of students, probably smaller groups of students, at the beginning and the middle and the end as a tier 1 strategy, and then potentially more with other students as a tier 2 strategy. Another suggestion that I would make for PBL specifically is to consider where the student can include their reflection. Maybe you have portfolios where students are keeping their work or their journaling. It can be really powerful for the student to revisit their reflections as they're going through a unit so that they can think about where they started, what they've learned, and how they've grown. It can also be a really great tool to use at student-led conferences. When you want the student to be able to talk about a project that they've done, they can take their parents through, well, at the beginning of the project, here's where my thinking was, here's where I was at the middle, and here's my reflection at the end and what I learned. All right. So we want to give you a couple of minutes to look through that protocol and consider what elements of the protocol do you already regularly practice? What might you continue to do to cultivate what Hammond calls building learning partnerships with students?
Evidence-based. I just can't wait for that button. Evidence-based teaching and assessment practices is number 4. This is really important, of course, that what we're doing is grounded in the research on what works. And so the resource that we're going to share with you today is very much grounded in research. Effective strategies include, but are not limited to, these 3 bullets: timely strategic feedback, student reflection, opportunities to share, and ongoing research. So I'm working on a separate project right now. It's all about service learning, which is kind of a type of project-based learning, right? So kids doing service learning projects. This is, I remember when I was in high school working at the senior center and helping serve lunch as part of my high school experience. I'm seeing some nods. A lot of us did that, right? And again, what's the question, right? Like, how can I be of service to my community? And that's where I started, and that's where we continued, right? So those projects are not complete until students do a reflection and a demonstration, so the opportunity to share learning. So that can look like a whole lot of different things, the poster demonstration, the PowerPoint demonstration, the opportunity to go present at the board meeting are all really important. And then students reflecting on what they learned and how they grew and how their project really mattered in their community, right, is all really important here. And then the ongoing research, that continuous improvement piece, continuing to improve our best course instruction and our best practices in our classroom so that next year we get even better at it. Anything you would add to evidence-based teaching, Erin?
No, I think that's it. You did it great.
Okay, great. So the next resource is another rubric for our Hierarchies Community School friends. These are analytic writing rubrics, and they're aligned to standards. So again, you're going to see informational, opinion, and argument in rubrics here, as well as interdisciplinary resources. These are different from the Summit Cognitive Skills rubrics because these are specifics to writing. And again, this is not just for ELA teachers. So we need to be writing in our social studies class, in our science class, in our electives, right? In our graphic design class, there could be a written reflection about how the design went and how it got incorporated at the auto shop. That part needs to all be part of it. So these can be used in their entirety or a la carte as formative assessments. And these are all here for you. Again, the Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity is where this research resource comes from. So on your one pager, this is the analytic writing rubrics, and it's going to take you to literacy design collaborative resources. And there's going to be a lot of actually more resources on this page, but I would encourage everybody to go ahead and expand all on the K-12 student work rubrics is what you want to be doing now. And go ahead and browse these different literacy design collaborative content rubrics, these analytic writing rubrics, and feel free to browse through some of these resources.